Welcome to Success Redefined with Dr. Toni Warner. I'm Dr. Toni, mom of 5, psychotherapist, author, and mentor. Here, you're going to find insightful discussions spanning science, psychology, and soul as the personal and professional meet, and we explore the intersection of what really matters. So success can be redefined with connection, healing, and fulfillment in mind. I've been thinking a lot lately about the ways in which I've been holding myself back and keeping myself small, and I know I'm not alone in this. So many women in particular, but this applies to men too. They can look from the outside like they have it all together and yet actually have parts of their lives where they are keeping themselves small or holding themselves back in some way. And we can get really good at hiding it. So let's talk about that today. Keeping myself small, holding myself back, that's a concept that I've struggled with because I've always been a pretty over-functioning, highly independent, passionate, advocacy and goal-oriented type of individual. And if you resonate with what we focus on in this podcast, you probably are too. You're probably that way in some ways too. And so it's always mattered to me to speak up, to speak out, to stand up when there are voices that aren't being heard, when someone who is hurt is clearly hurting. I've always wanted to help them in some way if I can. That's always been on my heart. But I've noticed that I've not extended this same depth, the same level of passion and advocacy for speaking up and standing up. I've not extended that to myself nearly as powerfully, as deeply, as intentionally, as courageously as I do for others. And specifically, it has been hard for me to do that in certain areas of my personal life. And it's not until my 30s where this became so much more evident to me. And I'm not saying that age necessarily has anything to do with it. It's just my seasons of life is that's where this has come up for me to take a closer look at. It's when I'm ready to, right? And we're all ready to look at different parts of our lives and different parts of ourselves at different times. So somewhere along my life journey, accumulation, it's accumulated over the years and years that I've been alive. I realize that I have learned to be a woman who discounts herself. While ironically, being a woman who is very passionate about and fights for others not to be discounted. And there's a connection there, right? There's a correlation there, why it matters so much for me to support others, whether it's in my professional life or my personal life, so that they're not feeling discounted in whatever way I'm able to support, help, aid, and yet struggle with that myself. I've held in my feelings because I think, well, no one really cares about them anyway, or they're just going to get in the way, or it doesn't matter. I've held my tongue because I think to myself, well, they're not going to understand, or they're just going to judge me, and it's not going to be helpful. I've held back my disagreements, my perspective, my unique viewpoint because, oh my gosh, what if they freak out on me? What if they get angry at me and take that out on me? I've kept my sadness, my anger, my confusion, my overwhelm, my hurt tucked inside of me because showing certain people in my personal life that I was vulnerable, that I was in need was scary. And I wasn't going to let them hurt me. I wasn't going to make way for that hurt, that pain to just easily fall upon me. I didn't want to get walked all over as a result. But all of those ways that I've been discounting myself for many years in my life, those are all I've been realizing those are all parts of me that I need and want to look at so that I can heal in those areas because I don't want to be a discounted woman anymore, right? I don't want to be a woman who discounts herself. It's not within integrity for me to value supporting others because I don't want them to feel discounted and then going ahead and discounting myself. And that's something that I've been navigating throughout my 30s. And I have made progress with it, significant progress with it. And yet it's still something that will come up here and there in certain areas of my personal life. And so I think this is a really important conversation for us to be able to have for as men and women, but in particular, since I am a woman, I'm speaking from a woman's perspective right now. It is something that so many of us struggle with. We don't understand, or we're ashamed of, or we hide it away because we just don't think it matters, or we don't have time for it. But that's all continuing to discount ourselves, to discount our needs, to discount our wants, to discount our thoughts, to discount our feelings. And we're thinking, oh, well, if we just discount ourselves in this way, we're benefiting someone else in some way. And that's actually a lie. That's actually not true. It's a lie that I bought into for a long time, but it is not true. A discounted woman doesn't automatically mean a benefit to someone else. In fact, when we discount ourselves as women, as mothers, as partners, as professionals, we actually are winding up in the long run taking away other ways that we could benefit other people, other systems, other parts of our society. And I know that that can sound really confusing depending on where you're at in your journey, but it is true. If you sit down and you ask yourself some of the ways that you've been discounting yourself and how you're feeling about that in that area of your life and how it's affecting you and that particular relationship, that particular domain in your life, I'd be willing to bet that you're going to come up with some things that if they've been long standing going on, they're not going the way that you want. They're not feeling good. It's not producing that positive, healthy outcome that you were desiring it to produce. And so it is something that we need to be aware of so that we can actually do something about in a very intentional and effective way. Because if everyone who thought differently, held their tongue because they feared being rejected, if everyone who felt differently silenced themselves because they feared being judged, if everyone who saw differently hid their perspective and experience from others because of this fear of being misunderstood, well, then we'd all have pretty superficial relationships because vulnerability would be so minimal, so low, so blocked off that to really get to the depths of one another in a relationship, to really share the depths of ourselves in a system or interaction with other people would be such a significant challenge. And if you can resonate with some of what I shared, some of the ways that I've discounted myself, you know what I mean. You know what I mean when I say this, right? It doesn't feel good in the long run. It doesn't feel good when it's become a pattern, a way of living, a way of interacting in certain areas of our lives. If we did this, if we continued to do this, there'd be more people walking around in fear, on and on and on. We already have that, right? But it would continue. The cycle of living in fear would continue. And so more people would need to live behind a mask or constantly strive to prove themselves or constantly be in this default mode of fight or flight or freeze or fawn, not coming, not operating, not interacting, not thinking from this place of more inherent connectivity and balance and calm and confidence and authenticity. And we hear that word authenticity thrown around all the time. I'll do another episode on that word in and of itself and how it's really gotten muddied down in the water. It's just tossed around and it's lost its power. That word has lost its power, but it really, if we can reconnect with the true intention, the true meaning of that word authentic, of being real, but being true within ourselves, to ourselves, it's a world changer. It's a relationship changer. It's a mental health changer. It's a mind changer. It's just so incredibly powerful. But if we keep up with being this independent woman on the outside while being this discounted woman on the inside, then it's not just us who are worse off as women. Our children who need role models of what it looks like to be able to navigate conflict in a healthy way without shutting down avenues for comfort, support, and vulnerability, they'd be worse off. Our partners who benefit so greatly from the experience of seeing and hearing and being challenged by our diverse perspectives, our diverse offerings, so that they can grow, so that they can heal, so that they can adapt within themselves, they would be worse off. If we continue being this woman who discounts herself internally while presenting this incredibly independent woman on the outside, then it's not just us that'll be worse off. It's not just our children. It's not just our partners, but it's our nation. Our nation, which requires innovative change in order to sustainably grow and adapt and evolve. Our nation that will and does benefit from what pioneering thought leaders and compassionate change makers like ourselves can bring to the table. Our nation would be much worse off. Growth would be stunted. Healing would be thwarted. Resentment and suffering would fester and swell and continue to grow. And it will permeate not just our relationships with the people we care about, but our systems politically and at work and everything in between. Ladies, we don't need to be a discounted woman in order to benefit the world, people, or relationships around us. If we can really believe that, if we can really sit with that and see what that means for us, I do believe that it has the capacity, it has the power to change so much of how we're showing up. But even more important than that is why we're showing up the way we're showing up. And for that to feel more congruent with who we are and how we want to be in this world. We all discount ourselves for some reason. And for me, some of the reasons why I had been discounting myself so often for so long was because I would feel bad or guilty or worried that if I wasn't discounting myself, then I would somehow be doing harm to someone else. So I worried that if I'm not discounting myself, then I might somehow be taking away from someone else, or maybe I'm not considering someone else. Maybe I'll be offending someone else, or maybe I'll just be discounting someone else in some way. And so I'd rather discount myself than discount someone else. It just became the way that I saw the world. It became the way that I would think. So there are two things that have really helped me to discount myself less. One is the idea that instead of being forced to pick one, I can choose to hold both. And here's what I mean by that. So often we convince ourselves that things are all or nothing. Whether we intend to do this or not, it happens. So if I'm too vulnerable, then I am not strong. If I express a need for support, then I can't actually be of help or support to anyone else. If I'm considering my own wants and needs first, then I'm being selfish and I'm not caring about other people. But needing to pick only one of each of these actually makes us feel blocked. It makes us feel like we have no choice, like we're stuck in a corner and there's no way out. And we don't want to pick the selfish way out because as women, we're not supposed to be selfish and blah, 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 right? So instead, what I've been practicing that has been really helpful, I've been practicing this for years now, is practicing holding both. Both can be true. I do not have to be backed into a corner and forced to only pick one. I can be vulnerable and I am strong. I can express a need for support for myself and I can still be of great support to others. I can consider my own wants and needs first, and I still can consider others too. Both can be true. I do not have to only pick one. Another thing that has helped me to discount myself less is this idea that exchanging inauthentic peace, and I'm putting peace in air quotes, is not worth the internal war that self-betrayal brings. What I mean by that is when we discount ourselves for the sake of keeping the peace or trying not to rock the boat, then we put ourselves on the back burner and we often wind up making decisions that are not congruent with the way that we actually want to show up or the way we actually value showing up at our core. And ultimately, this really creates what I call a tug of war or this internal battlefield that happens within us. And this fosters fertile breeding grounds for resentment, anxiety, depression, and the like. And that sucks. Right? That feeling sucks. You know, that feeling you get inside of yourself. You're like, oh, I really feel like I want to make this choice or do this thing, but I'm so scared that someone's going to think this or do this in response. And so you feel that internal terror of which way to go, that tug of war. It sucks, right? And so reminding myself that making decisions based out of fear, like for the sake of avoiding conflict, avoiding failure, avoiding judgment, or unintentionally offending someone, making decisions based out of fear like that is actually it's going to come back and it's going to probably not hurt just me, but also hurt or harm or otherwise create some kind of unhealthy dynamics within my relationships with other people, which of course none of us want, right? We're trying to do this whole thing of discount ourselves because we value relationships, but then it actually winds up negatively affecting our relationships down the line because we've set up this unhealthy dynamic that isn't really going to be sustainable for us if we want to continue on in this particular relationship. And so I have found that those two ideas, reminding myself of them, has been really helpful. Reminding myself that I don't have to discount myself. And if I catch myself doing that, saying, Toni, both can be true. You can care about yourself and care about others. You can be vulnerable and you are strong. Reminding myself that I don't have to create this fake sense of external peace by silencing myself or discounting myself. Because when I do that, it actually creates this inside war, this internal tug of war that makes me feel worse and ultimately does not serve the best interests of me or those around me or the systems that I'm interacting in. And so I'm curious if you are someone who has noticed that you have this kind of background default pattern of discounting yourself, what helps you? Or what do you think might help you now that you're noticing this pattern to become more aware of it so that we can shift it and be able not just to show up better for ourselves without discounting ourselves so much, but also as a result, be able to show up more genuinely, what I call more core connected within ourselves, so that we can go out and live the life we want to live, do the work that we want to do in a way that feels passionate and loving and fulfilling and freeing in a way that we feel successful with who we are and how we're showing up. Let me know what you think. Until next time, y'all, I hope you feel successful being you today, tomorrow, this week, and as much as possible forever. Bye. Links related to this episode can be found in the show notes section. Want to submit questions about success, satisfaction, healing, and relationships, health, or work? You can do that free and anonymous at drtoniwarner.com. where you'll find other resources there as well. Did you benefit from this episode? You can subscribe, like, and share with another to pass it on because anyone can listen on the go with this podcast audio available on all major podcasting platforms.